Well, good morning and good afternoon around the world as we have participants from all over the world today. I'd like to welcome you to our session on what is SolidWorks really up to, presented by Ally PLM. So I'm here with the Ally PLM Solutions team. And for the next 20 to 30 minutes, we're going to discuss what's taking place in the SolidWorks world and what they're doing with their software and what options you may need to be considering in the future based on your current needs. So one of the interesting things when you look at SolidWorks is the fact that they've gone ahead and announced that they're really making strides to eliminate the SolidWorks product in the long term. And when I say they, it's really Dassault. To the extent that when you look at the world headquarters building for SolidWorks in Massachusetts, that they actually have removed the SolidWorks logo from the building, and it's now a Dassault sign. So they're already starting to change that branding and that relationship in marketing with what the product will really become in the future. So let's just look at where SolidWorks stands today from a business standpoint. And then, as I said, over the next 20 or 30 minutes, we'll talk about some of the announcements they've made over the last year or so, and as recently as SolidWorks World 2013. So just a couple of numbers here talking about how many total customers, total companies they have worldwide, and obviously a very strong product in the marketplace today. But some things are starting to change, and one is an example. If you look at the list of key executives on the right side of the screen, is Mr. Bossi, who's the Vice President of Research and Development. He was actually the developer for the V6 kernel that CATIA is based on, and now he's become one of the top executives inside of what is the existing SolidWorks command structure today. So you can see some of those changes taking place to move the product more towards a CATIA-centric environment. Now, just to look at some of the other numbers, and again, you can see some of the milestones on the left side of the screen, as well as their sales numbers as you look at those over the last few years. And you look at total licenses, and SolidWorks likes to talk a lot about having 1 million customers out there, and yet there's really about 500,000 commercial licenses. A lot of this is in the educational environment, which is a strong marketing or business standpoint to do, because then that brings students out of school that understands the product. As well, in the bottom right corner, you'll notice where the business is split across 3 major geographies worldwide, with the Americas, Europe, and Asia Pacific, and fairly well split across those different disciplines. So when you talk about having 1 million seats or 1 million customers out there today, the issue with that is that really a true statement? Now, whether you're working with other companies that use SolidWorks or not, really this is based upon trying to get the marketing numbers out there that you're dominating in the marketplace. And when you see these things, you have to consider, how many of these were given to educational institutions for free? How many of these licenses are still under maintenance and being used day in and day out by different customers? And that's what this blog page that I've just clipped out was really referencing, and saying that, you can start playing with numbers and making things look different than what the reality is in the world today as far as your total seat counts. And when you look at, again, as we continue to look at the business here, you'll see that where CATIA software and Innovia, which is for the file management or the product lifecycle management, where their software sales have been over the last year-over-year from June of 11 through June of 12, you look at the mainstream SolidWorks and about 25% growth. So the numbers continue to grow, but we're starting to see a change in that trend, and continue that to expect to happen for the reasons that we're going to talk about now. So this all really started at SolidWorks World 2010. And at that point in time, everything relative to SolidWorks was held within its own organization, completely separate from Dassault. They allowed SolidWorks to run as a totally separate business, and in fact a competing business. CATIA and SolidWorks would compete in accounts on many, many times. So based on that, what was very interesting was, for the first time in 13 years of the SolidWorks World event, the keynote speaker in 2010 was Bernard Charlet, who of course is the CEO of Dassault Systems. And that was a surprise to all of the users, all of the bloggers, anyone in attendance, that Bernard would be involved in that and do the keynote speech. Well, some of the things that were announced during that event was showing that SolidWorks was it actually showed running it on a Dassault kernel, on the V6 kernel. And you see in the image in the top left corner of the screen, it was actually a telephone shot from a cell phone image. It says SolidWorks V6. And as SolidWorks users today out there, anyone on this call, you're well aware that there's really no such thing as a SolidWorks V6. It's always been based on the year that the product was released, like SolidWorks 2010, 2011, or today 2013. So that was a surprise to many of the users as well. Notice in the bottom left corner of the screen, excuse me, this was the interface that they actually showed running this new product. And again, as you can see, looks nothing like the SolidWorks environment. So it concerned a lot of users out there at the time. They wondered where things were going. Well, one of the other announcements that came out from this was that Dassault was going to abandon the Parasolid kernel. And just very briefly, if you're not familiar with what that means, what the Parasolid kernel is that underneath every CAD system out there today think of it as the car inside or the engine inside your car. You have to have an engine that can run all of the processes and all of the commands that you want to do to create things within your system. And that's what Parasolid is. Now, the SolidWorks software buys that kernel from Siemens. And Siemens develops the Parasolid kernel, their Solid Edge product, as well as their NX product. And hundreds of other software companies in the world use the Parasolid kernel. Now, what's interesting about that, of course, is that CATIA has its own kernel underneath it that Dassault has developed, and it's called CGM. There's a few different names for it, but for the most part, people refer to it as CGM. So CATIA and SolidWorks do not share the same kernel. Well, think of your company. Would you want to buy your main engine that runs part of your company from your competitor? Most likely not. So it made a lot of sense for SolidWorks, or the Dassault company who owns them, to make the decision that we really want to abandon the Parasolid kernel and do something different in the future. We'll get into more details of that later. Hopefully that makes sense on what a kernel is underneath a CAD system. One other announcement they made, they talked a lot about cloud computing and allowing SolidWorks to run on any platform, including Mac or Unix or any way you wanted to run the system out there. And cloud has become a much more common word in the industry today, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit in a little more detail on what that represents for all systems. So what all was going on inside of SolidWorks during this time frame? Well, interestingly enough, Jeff Ray, who, of course, one of the top managers inside the company, the CEO of SolidWorks at the time, he was part of this announcement in the 2010 SolidWorks World on saying that we're going to abandon the Parasolid kernel. We're going to change things to the V6 platform that CATIA was running on at that particular time and still is today. And you can imagine what that did in the industry then. Much concern for anyone using the SolidWorks product. And interestingly enough, after he made these statements, and this came out to a lot of the bloggers who wrote a tremendous amount of information and articles, and we'll give you a link at the end of this presentation where you can access any of these things that I'm talking about today, as well as even more information on what's happening with SolidWorks and their kernel change. But they really jumped on this to talk about, why would you be killing off the SolidWorks product and the death of SolidWorks, so to speak? And some of the text here at the bottom of the screen talking about, who would imagine that in 1 year PTC would dump the Pro Engineer branding name to start something called Creo, and SolidWorks would announce that they're going to, discuss killing SolidWorks off. And that's literally what Jeff Ray said. Interestingly enough, he was transferred to another position shortly after this within the company. And this is just a quick screenshot of one of the magazine articles that came out on the death of SolidWorks. There's been a lot of buzz in the industry on, what's really taking place and what's going on behind the scenes, and a lot of announcements, were unclear as to the direction they were going to take. So they looked to the CEO of Dassault, and this is Bernard Charlet, and he's talking about the V6 kernel and what that represents, and he says here at the top of the screen, of course, that the future of SolidWorks will be using the V6 platform, and that means that both CATIA and SolidWorks will be on that same CGM kernel that I discussed a few minutes ago. And of course, his quote there at the bottom, the answer is absolutely yes. They're not going to say when that's going to take place. Of course, we know that's getting closer as they're talking about some product releases a little later this year. And he says, you won't care what's inside the product, but you will care whether you can get your files into that new product or not. And that may be a major issue for existing SolidWorks users today and having the same capability and functionality within the product. So it's one thing to kind of see what bloggers are saying about it and to see some quotes from Bernard Charlet, but it's another to actually hear it from his mouth. And this was a presentation that he gave recently to a lot of industry analysts and talking about what they're doing with the software. So let me go ahead and run this.
When you look at now the other dimension, which is the imagination and the power of 3D for imagination, what do we have? We have the broad CATIA product portfolio. SolidWorks is also expanding. And as you know, we have announced clearly that SolidWorks will adopt the V6 technology everywhere, modeling included. We're going to drop Parasolid. It's going to be marginal. And we're going to generalize the use of the power of modeling of CATIA for everything. We use the power of V6 technology.
So you can see from his statements there, he clearly defines that they're dropping the Parasolid kernel and that both SolidWorks and CATIA will be running on their new, they call it the 3D Experience platform. That's equivalent to the CGM. That's the same thing in their terminology when they describe those operating systems or the engine underneath the systems. So what's happening more recently? So that was kind of the announcements of what's come out over the last couple of years. But at SolidWorks 2013, SolidWorks World 2013, which took place in January of this year, so we're just going back a month ago, they announced an entirely new product suite that's starting to come out. And the initial name for this is SolidWorks Mechanical Conceptual. That's a little busy, but basically they're showing the first areas of development for their new product and what it's going to look like as this product is released to the public as a purchased item that you can create. So what does it really mean? And I'll show you some examples of it here in a moment. But what is it? Well, it's not SolidWorks as you know it today. In fact, it's not even close. It does not include the same functionality that SolidWorks has in it today, and some analysts, as you'll see in a few minutes, talk about it can be years before it'll ever have the same functionality. And of course, it's CGM based. So the kernel, we talked about that a few minutes ago, it's the same as CATIA, but it's very different from what SolidWorks has developed on today. And it would be very difficult to try to change from one kernel to another and have all of the intelligence come across and have all of those files read from one system to another. So what's the future timeline look like? Well, if you look at something in the naming conventions may not be as clear, so I'll try to clarify here that SolidWorks version 1, and that's not going back 18 years ago, but they're going to really kind of rename this currently for SolidWorks as you use it today, and it's the same products that have been produced since 1995. They kind of name that SolidWorks version 1. Then they're coming out with and that will stay Parasolid based, by the way. That's going to stay on the same kernel. They buy that from us, and from Siemens Corporation, and that is a purchased item, and they'll continue to develop on that. Then they've created the new mechanical conceptual product. That's a new product direction and a new focus, right? And that's the direction they'll want all of their customer base to go in the future. Right? So what does that really mean when you're trying to look at what these products represent and how can you get your job done? Well, here's what mechanical conceptual look like from the release here at SolidWorks World 2013. And one of the many analysts and bloggers out there today, Matt Lombard, made this statement you see on the screen. He is the author of the SolidWorks Bible. He was in attendance at this event, and he has major concerns with where SolidWorks is headed, or where Dassault is taking the SolidWorks product, and he's even starting to change over and use other products and tools. And he looked at it and made the comment there towards the bottom that it looked like a 2D mechanisms designer, and that was really disappointing news to him, even as a skeptic, that he couldn't believe that it was lacking in so many ways for all the announcements that they've been making on this new product coming out. And went on to say that it's not even going to be in beta for a couple more months and not available to customers until the end of this year, and yet there was supposed to be something available at the end of the previous year. So he saw some major concerns from that standpoint and a lack of development very quickly. Evan Yars is another blogger out there, an expert analyst on software systems today, and he made these comments, and he said that it's going to be many years and many releases of this new V6 generation product of SolidWorks, or whatever you want to call it, mechanical conceptual, before the functionality and capability is going to be enough to replace what you currently use today as a SolidWorks user. How long will it take to redevelop all of those tools? So he really came up with this, what was the deep secret of SolidWorks World 2013? And that secret highlighted in red here is that SolidWorks V1, the current generation of product, the product you've been using it was started 18 years ago, is being transitioned from an active development product to maintenance mode. And let's talk about what that really means. You know that every time you get a new release of SolidWorks, there are new enhancements, new tools, new capabilities within the software. Well, the forecast then is that that's just going to become a maintenance mode product, meaning there will be bug fixes, there will be very small enhancements, but the major focus for Dassault is not going to continue with this SolidWorks product that's Parasolid based. They're going to want to have everybody move on to the new tools. And of course, that's the CGM based tool of mechanical conceptual. So the concern is for existing SolidWorks users, what takes place and how soon do you have to do that? And what Dassault is promising, of course, is that you can make the change whenever you want to. But I think you have major concerns based on that. If you're not going to get any more enhancements in the products, why are you going to continue to pay maintenance on that product just to keep it running? Right? They're going to put all of their development effort into new tools and leave you behind as far as functionality and capability. And then from another one of the bloggers out there from Graphics Speak, Randall Newton made a comment that, CATIA, when they went from version 5 to version 6 of their own software, and this is, again, the CATIA product, first of all, you had to buy V6. You don't just get that as an automatic upgrade. Where are they going to do that to you if you're using SolidWorks today? But the other issue they had was huge problems with just bringing their own files from version 5 to version 6, and they were on the exact same 3D kernel, the CGM kernel. So can you imagine the complexity of trying to move all of the tens of thousands of files that you may have on SolidWorks today and the millions of files worldwide that are SolidWorks, and you're going to change those from a Parasolid kernel to CGM? What's the compatibility going to be there to be able to bring those files forward? So there's some major hurdles, major issues that Dassault has to try to bring you as a SolidWorks customer forward. So what else has been happening inside the business? Well, John Hirschtick, which you may or may not be aware, that he's really the father of SolidWorks. He started the company in the first place 18 years ago, oversaw all of the development of the product initially. Well, with all these changes inside the company, he's resigned. He knows that the tool was not going to be the way he foresaw that in the future, and has made changes to his career accordingly. So he's left the SolidWorks, the SolidWorks and the Dassault Corporation, and talks are that he may start up some new system out there, some new CAD system that he may consider creating. Another example is that this gentleman in the image above is showing that they've replaced Austin O'Malley, and Austin O'Malley as well has resigned. And he was the VP of Research and Development. And as I stated earlier, as you can see from the headline at the top of the screen, Mr. Bossi has taken over as the VP of R&D for SolidWorks, and he was the gentleman who created the CGM kernel, the V6 kernel that CATIA runs on today. He is now in charge of SolidWorks Research and Development. So that should tell you something as far as where that product's headed. So look at the SolidWorks 2013 top 10 enhancements. And this is right off the SolidWorks web pages and right out of their event that they held last month. And when you see these kind of functionalities listed as the top 10 enhancements in the functionality, like item number 4, dimensions should stay where you place them. Is that really an enhancement that would be considered in the top 10 of capability and functionality? So what we're seeing is, as I've highlighted here at the bottom of the screen, that most of their enhancements are view controls, rendering, catching up in sheet metal functionality to other industry leaders. They announced an electrical and a plastics package, but really they're just OEM products that have been around for years. So there's no true or real great enhancements in SolidWorks. And you're going to continue to see that and yet pay maintenance dollars to make that happen, just to put this product into what we call maintenance mode, or as what Evan Yars says, is maintenance mode to keep the product running. And at some point, you're going to have to say, well, okay, we'll make a change. What direction is that going to be? So let's talk about cloud computing for just a couple of minutes. Now, this is another one of the major areas they talked about starting back in 2010. You hear a lot of people talking about this in the industry today. And just to clarify on what this is, if you're not familiar, it is just a general term that involves a service provider hosting information for you over the internet, right? So it means that you don't have to own the general or the physical infrastructure. A third-party company would provide that to you. It can be very scalable, and when you look at the cloud in the bottom right corner of the screen, you may see some products there that you use today. Salesforce.com is a very common tool. Even Google and HP, different companies use the cloud to put information out there for people to access. So there are some advantages and disadvantages to what this cloud computing represents. So let's just look at a few of those. So from an advantages standpoint, what it means is that you reduce the cost, because cloud technology can be paid incrementally, and this is what SolidWorks is already talking about, is that you can save a company money pretty much by renting the software as you use it. So just like electricity, you pay for what you use. You have increased storage. Organizations have that ability to store more data than just on a private computer system. There would be huge terabytes and terabytes worth of information out there you could store on other servers or other systems. It's highly automated. Your IT personnel don't have to worry about upgrading software and worrying about are you on the latest release, because that would actually be handled by the company that's managing that over the cloud in the first place. And more mobility. Your customer, or you as users, can access software from anywhere. You don't have to be at any specific site. You may be at home, you may be on the road, you may be in the office. So there are great advantages to the cloud computing and what that means. Some of the concerns, though, or the disadvantages of cloud computing come into play because the CAD industry is far different than just managing Excel spreadsheets and Word documents and other types of documents in Windows, because our data is so much heavier. So one concern is that we rely totally on the network connection speed. So if you're working on software that's over the cloud, you don't actually have that software loaded on your local machine. You're accessing that out there. Then you're going to be much slower if you have a slow connection in the network. Changes in applications. Many customers out there today, regardless of what software you may use, you don't necessarily upgrade to the latest version of that software when it first comes out. Some companies stay on older versions to be compatible with other companies they do business with. That would really be taken out of your control, as changes in application will just take place based on your provider, whoever you're using for that. And there's that internet connection dependency. So, if a connection fails, you're offline. Cloud computing simply doesn't work, so you're not getting your job done. And low-speed connections. Again, as I stated, because CAD files are so much heavier, so much larger files that we have to deal with day in and day out, that can be a major concern over the internet. And probably the number one thing that you'll see if you go out and read any of the blogs and the bulletin boards where people talk about this is lack of secure data. If you're doing any kind of work, whether it be defense contracting or not, just companies that are concerned about their intellectual property that they design things, do they really want to store this on a server that's out on the cloud somewhere where they don't have that file located on their hard drive inside their company? And there are many companies that don't want to do that. So we're not really saying whether cloud is a great thing or not a great thing. We're just trying to educate and let you know what the advantages and disadvantages are so you can make that educated decision in the future on what makes the most sense. So back to just some other functionality and some things that SolidWorks has announced and some of those tools that they talked about, as well as the cloud computing, was we really see a lack of focus on the machinery market, which they've been so strong for so long, and there are still more enhancements that need to be made in those areas of software, and yet they announced live buildings, which would be one of their first V6 applications. Unfortunately, or not, just depending on how you look at it, this product really didn't come to fruition. It's pretty much been dropped, put on the back burner. They've come out with a new tool or a new name for this, but it really hasn't become in full development, and they're still trying to get that off the ground. And then finally, you look at what about the SolidWorks partners? So many of you out there today using SolidWorks tools may also have third-party products that sit on top of SolidWorks. And here's just a few examples, whether it be Hypermill or DriveWorks or VisualMill or CamWorks. I mean, there are hundreds of different tools that sit on top of SolidWorks. Well, all of those tools have been written as Parasolid base to work with SolidWorks. Well, what does this change in kernel mean to all of those companies out there who have developed these tools? They're going to have to go back and rewrite all of their tools to work with this new mechanical conceptual product that Dassault is putting out, because it's now on the CGM kernel. So where does that leave them? It's going to require them to rewrite their code and probably recharge everyone. So will these products still work? Typically they're going to have to be rewritten for that new CATIA kernel, CGM. Dassault has actually started to push, for lack of a better term, some of their gold development partners to start working with that 3D experience platform. And I told you that's an interchangeable term for the CGM base, that CGM kernel. So they're trying to get some of their gold partners to go ahead and start writing software to work in that discipline, because they realize that they're going to have so many of those gold partners left behind that were based on Parasolid. And then the question to you is, will you have to pay for that new version of third-party software when it's rewritten for the CGM language if you decide to go that route? And I can't imagine too many companies writing brand new software on a new kernel that's not going to charge you to make that happen. So in closing thoughts, just a few items to think about is that, SolidWorks today, the Parasolid version, the Parasolid-based version, will be phased out over time. There's no question about that. You can go look at any history in software or CAD, our CAD industry. Whenever new software is being developed, a new direction, a new focus is headed, the original older product is always going to be phased out over time. So innovation of this product is going to dwindle, just as you saw in the top 10 list of 2013 for SolidWorks. Very few really innovative ideas and techniques and additions to the software, pretty much just bug fixes and making things work the way they should. So are you satisfied to pay maintenance on an obsolete product with limited enhancements, right? And some people today say, well, SolidWorks does what I need it to do. And it may for today, but as your company grows, as you stretch the technology, as you move into new marketplaces, will this product grow with you? And the answer is no, because it's going to be phased out. And then also, do you have a migration strategy? So if SolidWorks works for you today, that's great, but what are you going to do in the future if it doesn't? And do you have a strategy in place to make that happen? And will Dassault put in writing that you'll receive the replacement for SolidWorks whenever that happens at no cost? Excuse me. And finally, what will the learning curve be for that replacement product based on CATIA? As you can see from the images, it looks nothing like SolidWorks today and probably won't. It's going to look more like CATIA, so therefore you'll have a whole new learning curve learning a new product, so whether you go that direction or move to some other tools in the industry that can do a better job for you, it's still going to be just a learning curve of moving into that other product. So there's a site that we have here on the screen. You can certainly go to this. I'll leave this on the screen for a moment if you'd like to either do a print screen on your screen out there viewing this today, so you'll have this website, or if you want to write this down quickly. But Ally PLM, who has sponsored this event today, if you go to their website at alliplm.com/SolidWorks, you'll see, as I'm about to bring up on the screen for you as well, some of the things that they have relative to your growth and what you want to do in the future. One of the nice things is if you decide that you want to replace SolidWorks in the future, you get 50% off the Solid Edge price to replace every seat of SolidWorks that you have out there today. So Solid Edge is a fantastic tool, very similar in interface, very similar in functionality, but not a product that's ever going to be eliminated as you're seeing take place in Dassault today. Also with that, you'll notice that as you slide on down this initial screen under important articles, all of the information that I've presented here over the last 30 minutes or so is within this section, as well as some other materials that go into a little deeper detail even than what I've covered for you today. And what we wanted to do was just give you that overview. We realize how important you are in your business and work today, that we didn't want to take more than about 30 minutes of your time so that you could see what's going on in the industry. We certainly hope that this has been educational and informal to you and can help you make a better decision in the future. If there's anything Ally PLM Solutions can do for you, don't hesitate to contact them, as you've all registered for this event today. And with that, we thank you very much for your time and have a good day.
The organizer has ended the session, and this call will be disconnected.